written by Sansa Romance Oracle Prologue. There were two things Vera Ashcroft took with her when they exiled her. The first was a small leather satchel containing 3 changes of clothes, a hunting knife, a water flask, and 43 coins, everything the exile law permitted. The pack's border enforcers had stood at a precise distance while she packed, not helping, not speaking, performing the particular cruelty of people who are following rules rather than making choices. The second thing she took was the name of the wolf who had signed the order. She hadn't known him then. He was newly appointed. The pack's young alpha, 3 weeks into his title, inheriting a council full of older wolves who had already decided what needed to happen and needed a signature to make it official. She had been told his name the morning of the exile. Read from a formal document by Beta Kala with the careful neutrality of someone who understood that neutrality was its own kind of violence. By order of Alpha Calder Voss for the crime of territorial betrayal. She had not cried. She had been 22 years old, and she had not cried because crying would have confirmed what they wanted to believe about her. That she was weak, guilty, someone who broke under pressure. She had looked at the border of the territory she'd grown up in and walked across it with her back straight and her hands steady, and she had not looked back. That had been 5 years ago. She was 27 now, standing at the edge of the Ashford Pack territory with a document in her satchel that changed everything. 3 months of work. 2 witnesses who had finally agreed to speak. A full accounting of what had actually happened the night they said she'd betrayed her pack. And more importantly, a full accounting of who had actually done it and why. She had done everything right. She had built a case that could not be dismissed. She was aware that the last time she had believed that, she had been exiled anyway. But this time she had something she hadn't had at 22. She had nothing left to lose. The territory across this border was no longer home. It was a problem to be solved. The alpha who had signed her order was no longer an authority. He was a variable in an equation she intended to resolve. What she didn't know. What she had no way of knowing. Standing at that border with 5 years of exile behind her and a document that could end it, was that the moment she crossed the boundary line, the alpha felt it. Not guilt. Not recognition of a name in an old file. Something older than either of those things. His wolf came awake in a way it hadn't in 5 years of governance and said, with the absolute certainty of bone and blood, she's here. Calder Voss was in the middle of a council meeting when it happened. He set down his quill. His beta noticed. No one else did. He didn't know yet who she was. He didn't know yet what he had done. He would know both things within the hour. And the order in which he learned them would matter more than either of them could have predicted. Chapter 1. The return 5 years after exile. The Ashford Pack territory. Vera, the first checkpoint wolf, didn't recognize her. She'd expected this. 5 years changed a face. Or at least it changed the face's context. At 22, she'd been a pack wolf. One of theirs. Unremarkable in the way that belonging made people unremarkable. Now she was a stranger at a border checkpoint, and strangers got a different kind of attention. Name and purpose, said the young enforcer. He was maybe 19, which meant he'd been 14 when she left. He wouldn't know her face. Vera Ashcroft, she said. I'm here to file a formal appeal of an exile order under PAC law, Article 9, Section 4. The right of appeal upon discovery of new evidence. The enforcer's expression moved through several stages. Uncertainty. Recognition of the name, not of her, but of the name, the way names attached to stories persisted in PACs long after the person had gone. Then, the particular blankness of someone reaching for a protocol they hadn't used before. "Wait here," he said. She waited. She was good at waiting now. 5 years had made her patient in ways she hadn't been at 22. When she'd believed that being right was the same as being heard, the second wolf who came to the checkpoint was older. Mid-30s, a scar across his chin, the particular bearing of a senior enforcer. He looked at her with the careful assessment of a man who understood exactly who she was and was deciding what that meant. "Vera Ashcroft," he said. "Yes. You understand that your presence on PAC territory before your appeal is formally accepted is technically a violation of Article 9. Section 4 specifies that an exiled wolf presenting evidence of wrongful exile is granted provisional re-entry for the duration of the appeal proceedings." Vera said, "I have the document. Would you like to see it?" A pause. Something shifted in his expression. Not hostility, but the recalibration of someone who had expected a different kind of conversation. "Follow me," he said. The PAC's main settlement was both exactly as she remembered and entirely different. The bones of it were the same. The central hall, the training ground to the east. The council building with its carved stone door frame, the rows of PAC dwellings arranged in the pattern she'd known since childhood. But the details had changed in the way that 5 years of living changed things. New buildings, different faces at the market stalls, a training ground that had been extended. Wolves stopped to look at her as she passed, some with curiosity, some with something harder. She kept her eyes forward and her pace even, and did not acknowledge any of it. The enforcer led her to the council building and stopped outside it. "The Alpha will be informed of your arrival. You'll wait in the reception room." "Of course," Vera said pleasantly. The reception room was a small stone chamber off the main corridor, furnished with 2 chairs and a table, and a window that looked onto the eastern training ground. Vera set her satchel on her knees, and looked through the window. A training session was ending on the ground below. Wolves dispersing, collecting weapons from the racks. The familiar end of session loosening of formality. She watched with the detached attention of someone cataloging what had changed. Then the door of the council building across the training ground opened, and a man walked out and crossed toward her building with the purposeful stride of someone who had received a specific piece of information and was moving directly toward it. Vera looked at him through the window. She had never seen Calder Voss before. There had been no reason to. At 22, she'd been a junior PAC member with no council connections. And he'd been a newly appointed alpha dealing with the politics of succession. Their paths had not crossed before the exile. The signature on her order had been just a name. She looked at him now, and her wolf did something she had not been prepared for. It went quiet, entirely still, not the stillness of threat assessment or wariness. The stillness of something that had been moving for a very long time, suddenly finding a reason to stop. No, Vera thought clearly. She filed the sensation under completely irrelevant and returned her expression to neutral by the time the door opened. Chapter 2. The Alpha Calder. He'd been told her name before he crossed the training ground. Beta Calla had appeared at the council chamber door with the expression she wore when she had information that required careful handling and said, quietly, Vera Ashcroft is at the checkpoint. Article 9 appeal. She has documents. The council had gone silent. Calder had set down his quill. Vera Ashcroft. He knew the name the way. He knew all the cases from his first month as Alpha. Not well, but with the particular weight of decisions made in a fog of new authority. Inherited files, a council full of older wolves who had presented him with conclusions and needed signatures to make them official. He had signed that order. He remembered it. He also remembered that he had asked questions about it and been told the evidence was conclusive and the pack's security required swift action. And there had been 12 other urgent matters on his desk that week, and he had been 26 years old and 3 weeks into a title he'd never been fully prepared for. He had thought about that signature more than once in 5 years. The wolf, sense that had hit him when she crossed the border, was still humming in his chest, unfamiliar and insistent, as he crossed the training ground toward the council building. He had set it aside with the practiced containment of a man who had learned to manage his wolf's impulses in governance situations. Whatever it was not relevant to the next 30 minutes. He opened the reception room door. She was sitting with her back straight and her satchel on her knees, looking out the window, and she turned when he entered with the measured movement of someone who had been waiting and had decided exactly what their face would say when this moment arrived. He looked at her, and his wolf said something that his human mind immediately refused to process. He kept his expression controlled. Alpha Voss. Her voice was even, not warm, not hostile. The specific neutrality of someone who had decided to be completely professional. He sat across from her, the table between them, the satchel on her knees, her gray eyes on him with the quality of someone who was seeing him clearly and making assessments and keeping all of them private. "You've filed an Article 9 appeal," he said. "Yes. On what grounds?" She opened the satchel and placed a document on the table between them. Then a second. Then a third. She aligned them precisely, which told him something about how long she'd been carrying them and how many times she'd laid them out in her mind. "The night of my alleged territorial betrayal," she said, "I was in the eastern woodland, which the exile order states I had no authorized reason to be in. What the exile order does not address is that I was there because Beta Counselor Rand asked me to meet him there. I have a witness who was present at that conversation. I have a second witness who saw Rand in the eastern woodland that same night." After he had formally stated to the council that he was in the settlement all evening, she met Calder's eyes. "I have a third document, which is a financial record showing a payment made to a territorial competitor 4 days after my exile. The payment originated from Rand's private accounts." The room was very quiet. Calder looked at the documents, then at her. "Rand has been on this council for 11 years, he said carefully. "Yes," Vera said. "I know. These allegations are documented," she said. "I want to be precise about that. I'm not here with suspicions. I'm here with evidence. The kind that was never presented at my original hearing, because the original hearing was conducted by a council that included the man who set me up. Calder looked at her for a long moment. Why now? He asked. 5 years. Something moved in her expression, brief and private. The first witness took 4 years to agree to speak. The second took another 6 months. The financial record took 3 months to obtain through legitimate channels. She held his gaze steadily. I did it correctly, even though doing it correctly took 5 years. He thought about a 22-year-old wolf walking across a border alone with 43 coins and a hunting knife, because a council had presented him with a conclusion, and he had signed it. I'll review the documents today, he said. I'd like to be present for that review. A pause. That's not standard procedure for. With respect, she said, with a precision that made the words feel like a blade wrapped in courtesy. Standard procedure is what produced my exile. I'd like to observe the review of evidence that concerns my life directly. Calder looked at her. This woman, who had spent 5 years doing everything correctly, and was now sitting across from him with the evidence that should have existed 5 years ago, and the particular composure of someone who had learned that composure was its own kind of armor. Agreed, he said. Something shifted in her expression, not relief. She'd controlled past relief. Something smaller and more real. Thank you, she said. He nodded and gathered the documents and stood, and did not allow himself to look at her for longer than was professionally appropriate, which was a discipline that cost him more than it should have. His wolf had opinions about the distance between them that he chose not to acknowledge. Chapter 3. The Evidence Evening. The council archive Vera. He came to the archive himself. She'd expected a clerk, possibly Beta Kala, who had the efficient manner of someone competent enough to be trusted with sensitive material. She had not expected the Alpha to appear at the archive door at the 7th hour with his own copy of her documents, and the expression of a man who had been reading carefully since the afternoon. You've been here since the meeting, he said. Not a question. The archive keeper gave me access to the original hearing records, she said. I wanted to review them against my documents before tomorrow. He looked at the original hearing file open on the table in front of her, the record of the proceeding that had ended her life in this territory. Something moved across his expression when he saw it. May I? He said, gesturing to the chair across from her. It's your archive, she said. He sat. He set his copy of her documents alongside the original file and spent a moment looking between them with the focused attention of a man working through a problem he intended to fully understand. Rand presented the council with testimony from 2 witnesses at your original hearing, he said, both placing you in the eastern woodland alone. No authorized reason given. Both witnesses were pack members with direct loyalties to Rand, Vera said. I didn't know that at the time. I found it in the pack record 2 years later. Why wasn't your witness? The one Rand spoke to before the meeting. Why wasn't he present at the hearing? He was told the hearing date was the following week. Vera kept her voice even. He arrived to find it had already concluded. Calder went very still. The notification error was recorded as a clerical mistake. Vera continued. It's in the file. Page 11. He turned to page 11. He read. She watched him read. She had spent 5 years imagining this moment. The evidence laid in front of someone with actual authority. The case seen clearly for what it was. She had imagined it going many different ways. She had not imagined the alpha reading page 11 with an expression of quiet, controlled fury that appeared to be directed at himself as much as anyone else. I should have asked more questions, he said. Not to her. More to the file. Yes, she said. Because he was right and she was not going to pretend otherwise. He looked up. Something in his expression that she hadn't seen from a person in authority in 5 years. The specific discomfort of a man who understood that he had done something wrong and was not going to manage his way around that understanding. I'm sorry, he said. Vera looked at him across the archive table. She had prepared for many things. Arguments, deflections, procedural delays. The polite roading toward other doors that systems used to exhaust people like her. She had not prepared for an unqualified apology delivered in the first evening. She kept her face neutral, while something she had been carrying for 5 years shifted slightly in her chest. The appeal still needs to go through formal proceedings, she said. Your apology doesn't resolve it legally. I know, he said. I'll be requesting a full counsel review tomorrow morning. Independent assessors. He paused. Rand will be suspended from counsel duties pending investigation. She absorbed this. He'll know immediately why. Yes, he'll move to discredit the witnesses. I'll have them in protective custody before he's notified. He held her gaze. I know how to move quickly when I have reason to. Vera looked at him for a long moment. This man whose signature had ended her life in this pack. Sitting across from her in an archive, at the 7th hour, reading the evidence she'd spent 5 years building, and responding to it with the same precision she'd brought to building it. She had expected an enemy. She wasn't sure what she was looking at. There's more, she said. The financial record connecting Rand to the territorial competitor. If Rand sold pack boundary information, then the exile was designed to remove someone who might have seen something, Calder said. Or someone who could be made to look like the one who did it. I was in the Eastern Woodland that night because Rand wanted me there, Vera said. I've spent 5 years trying to understand why I think I was convenient. Junior pack member, no strong council connections, no family in positions of authority. Easy to move and easy to blame. The archive was quiet. The lamps burned low. Outside the high window, the pack settlement had gone to its evening rhythms. How long will you need to stay? Calder asked. For the proceedings. Until it's formally resolved. A week, perhaps. Depending on how quickly the independent assessors can convene. He nodded. You'll have quarters in the main building. Full pack access during the proceedings. A pause. If that's acceptable, it's acceptable, she said. She was gathering her documents when he said, without looking up from the file, you walked across that border 5 years ago with 43 coins. Yes. Pack law allows 60. I know. She pulled on her coat. The enforcer who counted my coins made a clerical error. She said it evenly. Because it was true, and because she had decided 5 years ago not to perform bitterness about it. But she watched his jaw tighten when she said it. Get some sleep, he said, which was not what she'd expected him to say. You too, she said, which surprised them both slightly. She left the archive. In the corridor, she paused with her hand against the cold stone wall and breathed. Her wolf was doing something unhelpful, and she was ignoring it with considerable effort. She had come back for justice. She had not come back for anything else. She reminded herself of this firmly and went to find her quarters. Chapter 4. What the Alpha Knows Night. The Alpha's study Calder. He sat alone in his study with the file and her documents and a cup of tea he hadn't touched, and the very clear understanding that he was in a situation of layered complexity that required careful management. Layer 1. The evidence was solid, more than solid. Rand had framed a junior pack member, used a hearing he'd arranged to process without her primary witness, and sold boundary information to a territorial competitor. The exile had been the mechanism. Get Vera out before she could piece together what she'd almost seen that night in the eastern woodland. Layer 2. Rand had been on this council for 11 years. He had allies, loyalties, a network of obligations that reached into every administrative corner of the pack. Moving against him quickly was essential. Moving against him wrongly would let him escape on procedural grounds. Layer 3. Layer 3 was the problem he had been setting aside since he'd crossed the training ground that afternoon and opened a reception room door. His wolf had known the moment she crossed the border. He had dismissed it as a stress response, some artifact of the governance pressure he'd been under, his wolf's tendency to react to unexpected stimuli. He had crossed the training ground and opened the door with the confident expectation that whatever he'd felt would resolve into something manageable once he had context. It had not resolved. It had clarified. He had spent the last 3 hours in an archive with his mate, reviewing evidence of the wrong he had done her, and his wolf had spent those 3 hours in a state of sustained conflict between the need to close the distance between them and the absolute impossibility of doing so. She had come here for justice. She had spent 5 years building a case with the precision of someone who had learned that being right required more than being right. It required evidence that could not be dismissed, witnesses that could not be discredited, documentation that could not be explained away. She had come here to resolve an injustice. He was the man who had signed the order that created it. Beta Kala knocked and entered with the specific expression she wore when she had processed a situation fully and had arrived at a position. "You've been in that archive for 3 hours," she said. "The evidence is solid. I know. I read it when she arrived." Kala sat across from him. "Rand is going to move the moment he hears." "I know. I want witness Sierra in protective quarters tonight." "Is filed. Already arranged." Kala paused. "Calder." He looked at her. "She doesn't know," Kala said carefully. "She doesn't know anything except that she has grounds for appeal. Then you have a problem." Kala held his gaze with the directness that made her irreplaceable. "Because the proceedings will take a week. She'll be here for a week. And if Rand figures out that there's any personal dimension to how quickly you're moving on this..." "There's no personal dimension," Calder said. "I'm moving quickly because the evidence requires it." "That's true," Kala said. "It's also completely true that you recognized her the moment she crossed the border and have been sitting in an archive with her for 3 hours instead of sending a clerk." She paused. Those two things can both be true. Calder looked at the file on his desk. She came here to clear her name, he said. Not for anything else. I signed the order that exiled her. Whatever my wolf, he stopped. It doesn't matter what my wolf says. What matters is that she gets the resolution she came for without any additional complication from me. And after the proceedings. After the proceedings, she has every right to leave and never come back. The words tasted exactly as difficult as he'd known they would. That's her choice. It's entirely her choice. Calla studied him for a moment. You're going to help her dismantle Rand's arrangement, handle the independent review, manage the council fallout, and do all of it while not telling her something significant. Yes. While she thinks you're the man who wronged her. I am the man who wronged her, he said. The fact that I was 26 and badly advised doesn't change the signature. Calla was quiet for a moment. Then, the second witness. She said it took 6 months after the first one agreed to speak. Yes, she's been working on this for 5 years, Calder. Alone. Calla's voice was careful. Whatever happens with the rest of it, make sure she knows that what she built was real. That it would have worked even without you moving quickly. He looked at his beta. It would have, he said. The case is airtight. Independent assessors would have reached the same conclusion without my involvement. Tell her that, Calla said. At some point. Tell her the evidence won it, not your position. After she left, Calder sat alone with the documents and the cold tea and the file from 5 years ago. He found page 11 and read the clerical error notation again. 43 coins. A junior enforcer who had made a mistake that was almost certainly not a mistake. He set the file down and looked at the ceiling of his study and thought about a 22-year-old wolf walking across a border alone and not looking back. His wolf had a great deal to say about this. He let it say all of it. Then he picked up his quill and began drafting the suspension order. Chapter 5. Rand's Move Morning. The council chamber Vera. The suspension notice reached Rand at dawn. She knew this because by the 8th hour, when she arrived at the council chamber for the formal appeal proceedings, the room had the particular quality of a space where something had already happened before she got there. Calder sat at the head of the table with Beta Calla at his left and 2 wolves she didn't recognize. The independent assessors, she understood. To his right, Rand's chair was conspicuously empty. 3 other council members were present, watching her arrival with varying degrees of wariness. Vera Ashcroft, Calder said, thank you for coming. Before we begin, I want to confirm for the record that independent assessors Merritt and Councillor Hale have reviewed your documentation overnight and found it procedurally complete for an Article 9 review. One of the unfamiliar wolves, the woman. Merritt, middle-aged with careful eyes, nodded. The documentation is complete. We're prepared to proceed. Vera sat. She had her own copies of everything, organized in the order she intended to present them. She had done this in her head 100 times over 5 years. The proceedings had been open for 20 minutes when the chamber door opened. Rand was not supposed to be there. The suspension notice explicitly prohibited his attendance at council proceedings pending investigation. He walked in anyway, a broad, silver-haired wolf in formal council attire, with the comfortable expression of a man who had calculated his options and decided he still had them. "I object to these proceedings on procedural grounds," he said, before anyone could speak. The evidence was obtained through Counselor Rand. Calder's voice was level and completely without heat, which was more dangerous than anger. "You were notified this morning that you are suspended from council duties. Your presence here is a violation of that suspension. The suspension itself is improper," Rand said. He looked at Vera with the assessing gaze of a man placing a piece on a board. "This appeal is based on the testimony of witnesses with personal grievances against me. Their credibility is. Their testimony is documented and corroborated," Vera said. She had decided, sitting in her quarters the night before, that she was not going to perform deference in this room. She had been deferential at 22, and it had cost her 5 years. "The financial record connecting your accounts to the Drail territory payment doesn't require witness testimony," she continued. "It's a record. Numbers and dates. Would you like to explain the payment?" The room went very quiet. Something moved in Rand's expression. The recalculation of a man who had expected a different kind of meeting. "This is a personal attack orchestrated by Beta Kala," Calder said, without looking away from Rand. "Please escort Counselor Rand to the security wing. He can present his objections through the formal investigation process." 2 enforcers appeared at the door. Rand looked at them. Looked at Calder. Something in his face went flat. "You have no idea," he said quietly to Calder, "what you're pulling on." "I'm beginning to," Calder said. Rand was escorted out. The room exhaled. Vera set her documents in order and looked at the independent assessors. "Shall we continue?" They continued. The proceedings took 4 hours. The independent assessors were thorough, which she appreciated. They pushed back on her evidence in the places where it was circumstantial, and she answered each pushback with the precision of someone who had anticipated every challenge. By the end, both assessors had reached the same conclusion the evidence required. The exile order was procedurally void. The original hearing had been improperly conducted. Vera Ashcroft was formally cleared. Assessor Merritt read the finding aloud in the particular measured tone of legal resolution. The chamber received it in silence. Vera sat with her hands flat on the table and breathed, and did not perform the emotion she felt, because this room did not deserve it. She looked up and found Calder watching her from the head of the table. Not with the expression of a man who had managed a situation. With the expression of a man watching something be put right that should never have been made wrong. She looked away first. Chapter 6. What Rand left behind. Afternoon. Calder. The finding was the beginning, not the end. He'd known this. Rand's network was 11 years deep. Obligations, loyalties, a structure of small corruptions that didn't collapse just because the man at the center was in the security wing. 3 council members had received benefits from Rand's arrangements. 2 pack enforcers had looked the other way at things they should have reported. The boundary information that had been sold to the Drail territory had created vulnerabilities that needed immediate assessment. He spent the afternoon in his study, with Kala working through the architecture of it, mapping who knew what and when, and what it meant for the pack's actual security posture. By the 5th hour, he had a clear picture of the damage, and it was worse than he'd expected. the eastern woodland boundary, the area where Vera had been that night, had been partially ceded in the Drail arrangement. Not formally, not on any official document, but in the way that territorial agreements happened before paperwork. Rand had given the Drail Pack informal access to a section of the eastern boundary in exchange for the payment, which meant the exile had served two purposes: remove the witness and establish the precedent for the boundary shift. A knock at his study door. He expected Kala. It was Vera. She stood in the doorway in her traveling coat. She'd worn it to the proceedings, he realized, as though she'd needed to be ready to leave at any moment, with the expression of someone who had been doing their own analysis. "The eastern boundary," she said. "Rand sold access. How did you?" "I grew up in the settlement closest to that boundary. I know what it looks like when usage patterns shift." She came in without being invited, which he found he didn't mind. "After I was exiled, I watched the boundary reports in public territorial records. The Drail Pack increased their eastern presence 8 months after my exile, gradually enough to not trigger formal dispute, but consistently enough to establish pattern." She looked at him. "How much did he give them?" He told her. Her expression did not change, but something in her eyes sharpened. "That's the grazing sector. The 3 settlements on our side of that boundary depend on seasonal access. I know." "When did you know?" "An hour ago." She absorbed this. "It needs to be formalized before Rand can argue the informal arrangement has standing. If you don't move to officially reclaim the boundary within 14 days under territorial law," he said. "I know. I have a team working on the documentation now." She looked at him with those gray eyes that missed nothing. "You've been doing this all afternoon." "It's my pack," he said. "It's also the thing Rand framed me to protect," she said. "I'd like to help resolve it." He looked at her. This woman who had been exiled from this pack, who had spent 5 years building a case to return to it, who had been formally cleared 4 hours ago and was now standing in his study offering to help fix the damage caused by the same man who had exiled her. "Why?" he asked. "Because these are the settlements I grew up in," she said simply. "The people in them are not responsible for what Rand did. The boundary access matters to them, whether or not my appeal was successful." He held her gaze for a moment. "Sit down," he said. "There's a great deal to work through." She sat. They worked until the lamps needed relighting. Chapter 7. The second witness, evening Vera. His name was foreign, and he had taken 4 years to agree to speak. She had found him 2 years after the exile, living in a neutral territory, a day's travel from the Ashford Pack boundary. He had been a junior council clerk at the time of her hearing. Present when Rand had given instructions about the witness notification. Young enough and afraid enough to say nothing. By the time she found him, he was still afraid, but he had a family now, and fear had changed its shape. She had visited him 6 times over 3 years. She had not pressured him. She had simply made sure he knew she was still building the case, that she was doing it correctly, that when he was ready, his testimony would be received properly. On the 7th visit, he had said yes. She was thinking about Foreign as she sat in the council building's small archive room late in the evening. The boundary documentation spread in front of her when footsteps stopped at the door. Not Calder. Different weight, a woman entered. Older, with the careful eyes of someone who had spent years watching rooms. Bidakala. May I? She said, gesturing to the other chair. Of course, Vera said. Kala sat and looked at the boundary documents and then at Vera with the directness of someone who had decided to say a true thing. He recognized you, she said. Vera went still. When you crossed the border, Kala continued. He was in the middle of a council session. He set down his quill. She paused. I'm telling you this because you deserve information rather than managed silence. Vera looked at the documents in front of her and thought about the reception room and the archive and the study, each interaction reorganizing itself slightly through this new information. He hasn't said anything, Vera said carefully. He won't, Kala said. He believes it would compromise your appeal, complicate your ability to trust that the proceedings were real and not influenced by. She paused. Personal considerations. Were they? Vera asked. Influenced. The proceedings were exactly what the evidence required, Kala said. The independent assessors had your documentation overnight before he spoke to either of them. The finding was always going to be the same. She held Vera's gaze. I want you to know that. The evidence won it, not his position. Vera absorbed this. It was what she had needed to know and hadn't known how to ask. Hey also, Kala said. Spent this morning personally arranging protective custody for your second witness before Rand was notified of the suspension. Foreign. Yes. A pause. He read your file, Vera. The original file from 5 years ago. Page 11. The clerical error. The 17 coins. He knows what they did on the way out, Vera said. Yes. The archive was quiet. Through the window, the pack settlement had settled into evening. Vera looked at the boundary documents and thought about 5 years of closed doors and a man who had opened the first one she'd walked through and said agreed without making her argue for it. I signed the order, she said, not as an accusation, as a fact she was examining. He was 26 and 3 weeks into a title he inherited under difficult circumstances, Kala said. That's not an excuse. He doesn't offer it as one, she paused. But it is the context. Vera was quiet for a long time. What happens after the proceedings conclude? She asked. That depends entirely on you, Kala said. He won't ask anything. That's who he is. She stood. I thought you should have the full picture before you decided what to do with it. She left. Vera sat alone in the archive with the boundary documents and the information she'd just been given, reorganizing 5 years of a story through a new arrangement of facts. She picked up her quill. She had boundary documentation to finish, and after that, she needed to think. Chapter 8. The Eastern Woodland Dawn. Third day, Calder. He found her in the eastern woodland before sunrise. He hadn't been looking for her. Or rather, he had been telling himself he was making a boundary assessment, and the boundary assessment happened to be in the eastern woodland, and the eastern woodland was where she was standing in the pre-dawn gray, looking at the section of the grazing territory that had been informally ceded. She turned when she heard him. Boundary assessment, she said. Yes, me too. She turned back to the tree line. The trail access point is through the northeastern gap. They've been using it seasonally for 2 years. There's a worn path. He came to stand beside her and looked where she was looking. The worn path was visible if you knew what you were looking for. the particular flattening of undergrowth that meant regular passage. "You came here that night?" he said. 5 years ago, Rand told me he had information about irregular access at the northeastern boundary. That he needed a junior pack member he could trust to observe and report. He said it needed to be unofficial. That if council members were seen investigating the boundary, it would alert whoever was using the access point. She paused. "I was 22 and I thought I was being trusted with something important." "You were being positioned," Calder said. "Yes. I understand that now." She looked at the worn path. He was already negotiating with the Drail pack. He needed someone in the woodland that night so that, if the negotiation was ever questioned, there was a pack member who could be made to look like the one who'd been there for suspicious reasons. Calder looked at the tree line and thought about a 22-year-old wolf standing in this exact spot, doing exactly what she'd been told to do, with no idea what it was going to cost her. "Vera," he said. She looked at him. "I want to say something and I need you to hear it as..." He stopped. Started again. Not as a formal apology. Not as a procedural statement. As a person saying a true thing to another person. He met her eyes. "What was done to you was wrong. What I contributed to it was wrong. The signature was mine, and the failure to ask sufficient questions was mine, and there is no version of the circumstances that changes those facts." She looked at him in the pre-dawn gray with the expression she held when she was taking something in fully. "Kala told me you were 26, she said. "That's not a defense." "No," she agreed. "It's context." A pause. "I've spent 5 years being angry at a signature. It's different standing here with the person who made it." "Different how?" She was quiet for a moment, looking at the worn path through the northeastern gap. "Harder to be certain about," she said finally. He held her gaze. "I'll spend whatever time is required making it right. The boundary, the record, the formal restoration. Whatever the proceedings require and whatever they don't require." "I know," she said. And then, quietly, "Kala told me about the border." He went very still. "When I arrived," she said. "She told me what happened when I crossed." The woodland was silent around them. The pre-dawn light was beginning to change at the edges. "I wasn't going to tell you," he said. "Because of the appeal? I didn't want you to question whether the proceedings were." "I know why you didn't tell me," she said. Cal explained. A pause. "I want to tell you something in return." He waited. "When I walked into the reception room and you crossed the training ground," she said carefully, "my wolf went quiet. I've never felt it do that before. I didn't know what it was." She looked at him. "I've been thinking about it for 2 days." The pre-dawn light was pale gold now at the horizon. "I came back for justice," she said. "That was the whole of my plan. I hadn't thought past the proceedings." "You don't have to think past them." "I know." She turned back toward the settlement. "That's not what I'm saying." She paused without turning back. "I'm saying I hadn't planned for this particular variable, and I'm still deciding what to do with it." "Take the time you need," he said. She glanced back over her shoulder. "You've been moving very quickly on everything else. This is different," he said. "This requires you to be certain. There's no timeline I'd put on that." Something in her expression, brief and unguarded. Then she turned toward the settlement. "The boundary documentation needs to be filed by noon," she said. I know, he said. I'll meet you in the archive. He stood in the eastern woodland alone for a moment after she left, in the specific pre-dawn gray of a place where things had been made wrong and were slowly being made right, and let his wolf say everything it had been holding for 3 days. Then he walked back toward the settlement. Chapter 9. Rand's arrangement. The security wing. Morning Calder, Rand had been thinking overnight. Calder could tell this from the quality of his stillness when the security wing door opened. Not the restlessness of a man who had been awake with anxiety, but the particular composure of someone who had worked through his options and arrived at a position. You moved faster than I expected, Rand said. The evidence was clear. The evidence was built by a wolf with a grievance over 5 years. Rand's voice was measured. Any court would acknowledge the motivational bias. The independent assessors reviewed it without that context and reached the same conclusion, Calder said. He sat across from Rand with the same attention he gave tactical problems. I'm not here about the appeal proceedings. Those are concluded. Rand's eyes sharpened slightly. I'm here about the Drail arrangement, Calder said. Specifically, who else in the pack knew about it? A silence. I want full disclosure, Calder said. Every wolf who had any knowledge of the boundary negotiation, every communication with the Drail pack leadership, every financial record connected to the arrangement. He held Rand's gaze. If you give it to me completely, I can work with the Investigation Council on the terms of what follows. If you make me find it piece by piece, you'll find pieces I've made very difficult to find, Rand said. Yes, Calder agreed. I expect so. I also expect that Vera Ashcroft will find them faster than you'd like. He paused. She's been studying your methods for 5 years. She knows how you work. Something moved in Rand's expression. A recalibration. She's staying, he said. Not a question. The observation of a man reassessing the board. She's assisting with the boundary restoration, Calder said evenly. Rand looked at him for a long moment with the assessing gaze of 11 years of council experience. You recognized her, he said. Calder gave him nothing. I wondered, Rand said, with the particular quiet of someone placing a piece precisely. When I chose her, I wondered if there was a reason she specifically felt significant to the pack. Beyond her position, he looked at Calder. It would explain a great deal about why you're moving this quickly. I'm moving this quickly because you sold pack boundary access and framed a junior pack member to cover it, Calder said. Reason? It is, Rand agreed. It's also not the only reason. Calder stood. Full disclosure. Complete records. You have until tomorrow morning. He left before Rand could say anything further. In the corridor, he paused with his hand against the stone wall and breathed, and did not allow himself to think about what Rand had said. He found Vera in the archive with the boundary documentation, and they worked through noon and into the afternoon, and he said, nothing about the security wing conversation. Some things required careful timing. Chapter 10. What she builds days 4 and 5. Vera. She hadn't expected to find work here. She had come with a specific mission. The appeal, the clearance, the formal restoration of her name, and had expected it to occupy several days of formal proceedings and then resolve into departure. She had not expected the departure to keep not happening because there was always another piece of the Rand arrangement that required the particular combination of her 5 years of external observation and Calder's internal authority. She was good at this, she was realizing. The methodical dismantling of a corrupt structure. She had spent 5 years developing skills she hadn't known she was developing. Reading territorial records, tracing financial patterns, understanding how information moved through administrative systems and where it left traces. By the 4th day, she had mapped the full extent of Rand's network. 14 wolves with varying degrees of involvement, 3 of them significant enough to require formal investigation. She presented the map to Calder and the independent assessors in the morning session with the same precision she'd brought to her original appeal. Assessor Merritt, who had been watching her across the table for 4 days with the careful attention of someone forming an opinion, said afterward, "You have a systematic mind." "I've had practice," Vera said. "What did you do?" "During the exile, I worked as a territorial records clerk in 2 neutral settlements, then as a legal researcher for a small advocacy practice." She paused. The advocacy practice specialized in wrongful exile cases. Merritt studied her. "There are enough of them for a specialty. More than people acknowledge," Vera said. Merritt nodded slowly. "The PAC's administrative council has been understaffed for 2 years," she said. "Since the previous records coordinator retired." She looked at Vera over the documents. "That's not an offer. It's information." Vera filed it. On the 5th day, she was in the archive when Calder came in not with documents, but with 2 cups of tea, and the expression of a man who had been managing things all day and had run out of things to manage. He set 1 cup in front of her without asking. She looked at it, then at him. "The boundary documentation is filed," he said, sitting across from her. "The formal reclamation is recorded. The Drail Pack has been notified through official channels." "I know. I filed it this morning." "I know you did." He wrapped his hands around his cup. "How are you?" She looked at him across the archive table. He had asked her this on the 3rd day, and she had said fine, because it was the automatic response, and because she hadn't been ready to give a different one. Tonight she considered the question with more care. "Strange," she said honestly. "I've been planning for this for 5 years. The thing I planned for is done." "Yes. I keep finding reasons," she said, "to stay another day. The boundary documentation, the network map, the investigation records." She looked at him. "I'm trying to determine how many of those reasons are real and how many are." She paused. "Something else." What would the something else be? She held his gaze. "You know what?" He was quiet for a moment. Outside the archive window, the pack settlement had gone to its evening sounds. The lamp between them burned warm. "The appeal is concluded," he said. "The pack's resolution of Rand's arrangement will continue regardless of whether you stay. You're not obligated to either of those things." He held her eyes steadily. "If you're staying for other reasons, I want you to be clear about what they are, for your own sake." "Why for my sake?" "Because you came here for justice," he said, "not for anything I could offer. And I'd rather you leave clearly than stay uncertain." Vera looked at him. This man who kept finding ways to give her the option to leave. Who had moved faster on her behalf than any system had moved in 5 years, and kept insisting that the evidence had done it. not him, who sat across from her in an archive with cold tea and asked how she was and meant it. "My wolf has been certain since the first day," she said. "The rest of me has been taking longer." "That's reasonable," he said, "given everything." "Yes," she looked at her tea. "I'm angry," she said. "I want to be honest about that. Not at you specifically, at the 5 years, at the 17 coins, at the system that made it possible." She looked up. "I don't want to pretend that's resolved because the appeal is concluded." "It's not resolved," he said. "It may take a long time to resolve. He paused. "That's something I'd like to be present for, if you'll allow it. Not to fix it, just to be there while it resolves." Vera looked at him for a long moment. "That's carefully worded," she said. "I've had several days to think about it." Something shifted in her expression. Not the composure she'd been wearing since the first day. Something underneath it, quieter and more real. "One more day," she said. "There's one more piece of the RAND network I want to trace before I decide anything. I'll be in the study if you need the territorial records," he said. She nodded and turned back to her documents. But she was almost certain she was smiling. Chapter 11. The Council Chamber 6th Day. The formal restoration both. The restoration proceeding was brief, which Vera appreciated. Pack law required a formal chamber, reading of the appeal finding, the official expungement of the exile record, and the restoration of full pack membership. It took 20 minutes. Beta Kala read the finding. The independent assessors confirmed. Calder spoke the formal restoration words in the measured tone of official proceedings. And then it was done. Vera stood in the council chamber with her name restored and her record cleared, and the 5 years of exile formally concluded, and felt the particular strangeness of a thing completed that had defined her life for so long that she wasn't sure what came after it. The chamber cleared gradually. The assessors, the witnesses, the council members who had been present. Kala left last with a look at Calder that conveyed several things without words. Then they were alone in the council chamber where it had begun 6 days ago. "It's done," Vera said. "Yes," Calder said. She looked at the empty chairs around the table. The formal documents stacked in the center. 5 years of her life resolved into papers that would go into an archive where they would matter very much and be seen by almost no one. Rand gave full disclosure, Calder said. "This morning, before the restoration, complete records of the Drail arrangement and everyone involved." What changed his mind? "I told him that you had already reconstructed most of it independently." A pause. "He decided full disclosure on his own terms was preferable to you finding the remainder." Something in her expression, not quite a smile, but the edge of one. "He was afraid of my records research." "With reason," Calder said. "You were 3 days away from finding the last piece yourself." She turned to look at him across the chamber. He was standing near the table with his hands at his sides, not managing his expression for once, just letting her look. "I've been deciding something," she said. "I know." "The administrative council position Merritt mentioned." He went still. "It would require me to be here." "In the pack." She held his gaze. "On my own terms. Not because the proceedings require it, not because there's another piece of Rand's arrangement to trace. Because I choose to be here." "Yes," he said carefully. "I want to be exact about the sequence," she said, and there was something in her tone that was deliberate, a precision she was choosing. "The position first. My own work. My own standing in this pack that I rebuilt correctly and legally and completely on my own." She met his eyes. "And then, separately, on its own terms, the rest of it." Something in Calder's expression that he had been containing for 6 days. "That's the right sequence," he said. "I know it is." She took one step toward him. "I'm not forgiving the 5 years right now. I want to be honest about that. It's going to take time, and it's going to be complicated, and I'm not going to perform a resolution I haven't reached. I'm not asking you to. I know you're not. That's part of why I'm still here." She looked at him steadily. "What I'm saying is that I'm choosing to be present while it resolves, which is different from it being resolved." He looked at her for a long moment. This woman who had walked back into a pack that had wronged her and dismantled the corruption that had exiled her, and was now standing in the chamber where it had all been formally concluded, and saying, with complete precision, exactly what she meant and nothing she didn't. "Vera," he said. "I know," she said quietly. "I know." She crossed the remaining distance, and he met her halfway. His wolf, which had been patient for 6 days and had been waiting years before that, finally going completely still in the specific piece of having arrived. She put her hand against his jaw, and he covered it with his, and the bond settled between them like something that had always been there, waiting for the moment both of them were ready. "Not because of the bond," she said against his shoulder. "I want to be clear." "I know," he said. "You've been clear about everything since the first day." "I'm choosing this," she said. "With full information and a completely functional alternative." A pause. "The administrative position stands on its own regardless." "I know that too," he said. Merritt already sent the formal offer to Kala. She pulled back to look at him. 2 days ago, he met her eyes. She said the pack needed someone who could dismantle a corrupt arrangement from the inside faster than anyone currently on staff. "She's not wrong," Vera said. "No," he agreed. "She's not." Something in her expression shifted into the real thing. The smile that had been behind the composure for 6 days, full and unguarded, belonging entirely to her. "The exile record," she said. "When it's formally archived, it'll be sealed and marked wrongful by official order. I want a copy," she said. "Not to look at, just to have." A pause. 5 years of work should produce something you can hold." He nodded. "I'll have it prepared." She looked at him in the council chamber light. The place where she'd arrived 6 days ago, with a satchel full of 5 years of evidence, and the name of the man who had signed her exile order, and allowed herself to feel, fully and without performing anything for anyone, exactly what she felt. It was more than she had planned for. It was considerably better than justice. Epilogue. 7 months later. The eastern woodland in spring looked nothing like it had in autumn. The northeastern gap, the worn path, the trail access point that had been Rand's secret for 2 years, was properly marked now. Boundary stones, placed correctly, documented in the territorial records, visible to anyone who knew where to look. The 3 settlements that depended on the grazing access had been formally notified of their secured rights. The seasonal patterns were undisturbed. Vera stood at the edge of the woodland in the morning light and looked at the boundary stones with the attention she gave things she had helped build. Calder stood beside her. "The new record system goes live next week," she said. "I heard." Calla said, "It'll reduce processing time by a third. At minimum." She had spent 4 months designing it. A territorial records architecture that made the kind of manipulation Rand had used structurally impossible. Cross-reference timestamps, independent verification requirements, access logs that couldn't be altered without producing a visible anomaly. The Administrative Council had adopted it unanimously. "There's a wrongful exile case," she said, "from the Marin-Pact territory. Merritt forwarded it last week. The documentation pattern looks similar to mine. A suspicious hearing, a missing witness, a convenient clerical error." Calder looked at her. "I'd like to take it," she said. "A's an official function of the territorial advocacy role. As the first case of a formal advocacy structure," she said. "One that operates between pact territories. Neutral ground, independent function." She turned to look at him. "There are more than people acknowledge. Cases like mine." He studied her for a moment. "You've been planning this." "I've been planning this for about 4 months," she admitted. "I wanted the record system established first. Proof of the methodology before expanding the scope." "Of course you did," he said, with the warmth that had been building in his voice for 7 months. She turned fully to face him in the spring light. "I want to be clear that this is separate from everything else," she said. "My work stands on its own. That was always the sequence." "I know the sequence," he said. "You've been exact about it from the beginning." "I have." She held his gaze. "The anger is still there sometimes. I want you to know that. It comes and goes. The 17 coins, the clerical error, the 4 years waiting for foreign to be readies." She paused. "It's smaller than it was. It changes shape. But it's not gone." "I know," he said. "I'm here for that too." She nodded. The acknowledgement of a person who had been told something true and recognized it as true. "The Eastern Woodland," she said, turning back to look at it. "It's better in spring." "It is," he agreed. "It's going to be better still." She was looking at the boundary stones, the cleared path, the properly marked territorial line. When people in those 3 settlements grow up knowing this boundary is secure. When it's just a fact, not something someone managed and manipulated. Just a fact. Calder took her hand. She looked down at their hands and then up at him with the expression that had been behind the composure all along. The one that was entirely hers, that she gave to the things she had chosen fully and without reservation. "The Marin case," she said. "I'll need territorial access to their records archive. I'll write the letter of introduction today, and a formal statement of the advocacy structure's independence. I don't want it perceived as an extension of Ashford Pack authority. I'll have Calla draft the language." "And, Vera," he said. She stopped. "We're done for today," he said. She looked at him. The Eastern Woodland in spring around them. The boundary stones correctly placed. The pack settlement visible through the trees, its morning life going on with the ease of people who had stopped calculating what they stood to lose. She had walked back to this territory with a satchel full of evidence and a name and 5 years of careful, correct, patient work. She had not planned for any of this. It was considerably more than she'd come for. Agreed, she said, and meant it entirely. End of the Exile's return.